use these headsets enough that I know I'm going to need a new one sooner or later because, you know, designed obsolescence is the key, so I better think about getting a new pair so I don't get caught blindsided. I'll go over here to KSL, which is our local version of a classified ad marketplace. It's just not loading up. And type in the word headset. So there, that tab will be open for me when I get around to looking at it. Okay. Let me think here. I want to do something unusual. So I'm still preparing for this thing. Oh. Hi, DB. Nice to see you. There's your little old invitation thingy. And I want to do a screen share of something. This. Okay, so I made a mistake when I was prattling on about this great chart that was made in the 1930s, maybe the 1940s, by Adlai Lowdy. And I'm not going to show you the whole chart. I just want to show you the mistake part, right? And discuss it because my mistake was a very important mistake to make. And it's a very, very important mistake to correct. Hi, Marcia. Hi, Michael Thunder. And DB, I said hi to you. You get 2 highs. Okay, so my mistake was I was, hang on, let's make sure that, let's go find my sweet little tools so I can annoy you with tools. Nope. How do you make this sucker bigger? Nope, that just makes it, nope, not that way. How did I make it bigger last time? Well, anyway, so you see the little tool here. So I was going on about, oh, it's so frustrating. I want a bigger arrow. And I can't have it. Whee! Okay, so let me get serious here. Okay, so I was going on about the seventh administration of how God deals with humanity, and that was the Pentecostal administration where God was dealing in displays of signs and wonders, right? Through Peter. And then I was going on about Paul and how that it was a transitional administration, right? God was in the business of changing things. And so it was where Paul was acting as a priest of Israel, and they were making, both Peter and Paul were making a message to Israel that was essentially offering them the kingdom if they did this or that, right? It was an offer of Christ returning as the king of the kingdom. And so In Peter's case, they rejected. In Paul's case, they rejected. Israel rejected this offer of the kingdom. And my mistake when we did the last show was I was going over this column right here and said that now God offers grace, and that is my mistake. You see, now the administration that God has going on with humanity now is not that God is offering grace. No. God does not offer grace at the moment. Here's the deal, and it's a good deal. God is operating in grace. He is not offering grace. It's a big deal. God operates in grace. What is the difference? What am I going on about? Okay. So, during the Pentecostal days, the signs and wonders under Peter in the second chapter of Acts, all this hootenanny was going on. And the Jews mildly tolerated Peter and his merry band of, miracle workers. And then they eventually got to where they weren't going to put up with it, and they killed Stephen and imprisoned Peter. And maybe John too. Yeah, Peter and John. And then there was a transitional period of emphasis and offer through Paul as the priest of God to Israel. And then when they rejected the offer a final time, well, then God does something totally different, something totally surprising, something that is called a secret kept from times Aeonian. He does not offer grace to the Gentiles. He operates in grace. It's an entirely different thing. So under the old administrations of God dealing with Israel, it was an offer type of thing. If you do this, I will do that. It was a covenant, and you must keep your end of the bargain. But now we are under an entirely different administration, an administration that was a secret in times past, but it's now revealed that God doesn't offer grace to anybody. He operates in grace, and there are no strings attached. It's such a gracious grace thing, and Paul has a tough time of describing it. And so in one passage in Paul's letters, Paul says that this is a new covenant. Well, guess what? It's such a new deal, new covenant, that just the word new covenant is actually a misnomer. It's called a figure of speech, right? It's a figure of retention. There are various forms of figures of speech. Well, this new covenant is a figure of retention. What does that mean? That means we are retaining language that we got from an old way of things because we don't know exactly how to describe it in our new way of things. And this new covenant, there's no covenant end about it. It's God operating in grace, and there's nothing you must do. You see? So when Paul uses the term new covenant, he's just borrowing lingo from a bygone era because God doesn't have any covenant going with us. It's God doing it all. His grace is something that is shown to those who don't deserve grace. They deserve the opposite of grace, and therefore, there's no covenant. There's no, you must do this and I will do that if you do this. That's what a covenant is, right? You make an agreement with the other party. But because there's never been anything like this before, it was a secret, withheld in times Aeonian. The Jews didn't see it. Peter didn't see it. Paul did not see it at first. It was a secret, held back, and now God is dealing graciously with all. And it's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. So let me show you another little show and tell thing. So we'll put that away and open up my second show and tell thing. And some time ago, this dude named Hussey, funny name, but he lived in the 1800s, and so he had no idea that his name was going to be a funny name. He was a hussy. Sorry. But he wrote this book way back in the 1800s called God's Operations of Grace, but No Offers of Grace. No offers of his grace. This is a free PDF you can find. Here, I'll put the link in the side notes so you can go find it yourself. I don't recommend that you read it. I just recommend that you read the headline or the title of the book. The guy, I've never read the book. I used to own the book, big old hardcover thing on my shelf. It's been gone for a while. But it's just the title of it is just darling. God's Operations of Grace, but No Offers of Grace. And Hussey, he calls himself a poor, despised servant of Jesus Christ and pastor of the Congregational Church of Christ at Cambridge. Let's see here. And so, oh, look, it's not 1800, it's the 1700s. It came out in the late 1700s. And so he was arguing not exactly against free will. I think he was a Calvinist. But he was arguing against this bullshit idea that God offers grace. Instead, God operates in grace. What is the difference? I don't care if you go read Hussey's book or not. Did I put the link in? Yeah, there it is. So I don't care if you go read his book or not. Here's the deal. If grace is an offer, then it ceases to be grace. So you can scroll down and have fun reading it if you wish, If you actually read it, be sure and leave comments in the in the comment section after the show and tell people what to expect. But if God offers grace, it's not really grace. It's a trick. You're calling something grace, but you actually are abusing language, right? Because what is grace? Grace is God's favor that he shows to anyone and everyone who does not deserve favor. He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. That's what grace is. Grace cannot be an offer, because if you so-called offer grace, then you're asking the dude, the sinner, the other party, you're asking them to meet the conditions, whatever are the conditions, okay? And if they meet the conditions, then you owe them the reward. That's what a covenant is. But in God's operations of grace, God owes you nothing, and you don't even try to appeal to God owing you anything. It's just that God deals with you in a gracious way. He brings you in. He gives you blessings that you didn't even try to get. If you look it up in the in the keyword concordance of the Concordant Literal New Testament under grace, it says that it's God's favor shown to those who deserve the opposite of favor. And can we all agree, if we have a little bit of understanding of what this whole program is with God and Christ and the resurrection and the punishment and the sin and la da da da, can we all agree that we all deserve the opposite of favor because we're all wrapped up in sin? There's no reason God should show us favor. But yet, during his operations of grace, he does show us favor. He opens our eyes and gives us the faith to believe that Christ died for our sins. Therefore, the problem is solved. He doesn't beg us to do anything. He gives us faith. He doesn't beg us to believe. He gives us the faith to believe. He doesn't give it to everybody. And that in itself is an operation of grace. God graciously locks up everyone in stubbornness for a display yet to be, because God's operations of grace are all about his purpose, right? And his purpose is to be all in all. And it takes a while before God brings it all together. We're in the middle of his creative efforts. We're in the middle of his operations. He deals with humanity in one way or another. Sometimes he changes his operations. But right now, the big operation of God is to be gracious to humanity. And if you find it in your heart to believe, why, that was not ginned up by you. God put that there, that faith. You didn't do it. So it's kind of exciting. I'm glad I made the mistake. I went back and I watched the earlier episode about, what do we call it? The movie God, or God the movie, a review. And heads up, what did I call that damn show? Let me go back there and see so I can be on top of my own stuff. God the movie, favorable review, warning, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. And what is the spoiler alert? Oh, that God becomes all in all. That's so cool. Not all in some, not some in all, not some in some, but instead God becomes all in all. Anyway, so this is just a real treat that I wanted to share with you, that I made a mistake, and thank God I made a mistake. I've said that God offers grace. I should have said that God has changed his operation from one of mercy to operating entirely in grace. So let me close up Mr. Hussey's book and bring back that little screen capture of the administrations, the current administration. So God was operating in mercy at one time in the eighth administration. It was very similar to what was going on under Peter. And it actually was a mercy. God was offering mercy at that time. But now God does not offer grace. God is gracious. Here he was offering mercy. Do you get the two dynamics of the two words? If you want, under this transition, this eighth administration, how God deals with humanity, if you wanted mercy, at the very least, you had to ask for mercy, ask for forgiveness, beg for pardon of sins. But now you don't have to ask for grace because God doesn't require anything. It's God's deal all the way. Mercy, you have to do something. There's a deal. Grace, there's no deal. Mercy is still under that covenant type of thing. Grace, if we refer to it as the new covenant, it's just a figure of speech. So I was telling you about the figure of retention. One figure of retention that we all say, that we all use in this day and age, is that we drive a car. But the truth of the matter is we do not drive a car. We control a car. And in the 1800s, in the cowboy days, we used to drive a team of horses. But when cars came along, we borrowed that lingo from the cowboy days with the horse and buggy. We borrowed that lingo, so we now say that we drive a car, but technically that is just a figure of speech. It's a figure of retention, thus calling this operation of grace, when Paul calls it a new covenant, it's a figure of retention because there's no covenant involved, technically speaking. God doesn't require anything of us. Some of us, he gives faith to some of us. To the rest, he does not give faith, but he still deals graciously. It's such a big thing that Paul calls it a secret. And here in Titus 1, verse 2, it says the comment under this section says, the present economy during which God's pre-Aeonian purpose is carried out. Wow, that sounds like a big idea. A pre-Aeonian purpose. So, anyway, so there you go. I'm done. There's your little invite again if you want to come in. Rhonda, Tommy, Michael Thunder, DB, Marcia. So do you get the big picture? That we're talking about God's operations of grace and no offers of grace. And I made a mistake and just casually mentioned God's offer of grace, and it's just not true. He doesn't offer grace. He operates in grace, and that's so much better. It's so much better. It's so big, such a big concept that Paul reveals that it was just a secret in times past. Nobody knew that God was going to deal with humanity in this kind of way. They're all focused on all that you must do. You must obey the law. How many laws? 300 or more. We're looking out for you. We're checking up on you. we're checking up on you. But no, we don't have to check up on anybody now because God is dealing graciously with the whole world. Hi, Alan. Hi, Rhonda. There's your little invite. Come on in if you want. I'm not going to be here long anyway, so. Because as you can see, I'm bending things around here. Whee! Sorry. Just screwing around. Since you're hanging out, oh, there you go.
Hey, man.
Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you, Drew and Alan?
All right.
How y'all doing?
Did you get the thing I sent you today?
I haven't checked emails today.
All right. Well, what's the word? Max, he asked for a study on Suke, and I did it. I got all of it.
Wonderful.
So we did Soul yesterday, and we have, what's the word? Suke, Soul of New Testament's ready to go.
Hot dog.
And after that, what's the word? Probably just study on Roach, Spirit, and then we'll go to Sheol. So anyway, if you're ready, or whenever you're ready to go do the suitcase study, let me know.
Okay, maybe tomorrow.
All right. Now the time, what's the word?
Maybe 5 o'clock. Maybe 5 o'clock p.m.
5 o'clock. All right.
My time.
So your time, all right. So I'll be like what, 6, I guess, for me.
I'm in mountain time, and you're 2 hours ahead of me.
Okay, so 7. All right.
So DB, your question is very gracious. Get it? We're talking about grace.
He does, but it's the amount of grace that's different.
Does not God operate in grace from the beginning? Well, in a grand scale, yes, we could say that. But in a relatively speaking, God is not always gracious. Sometimes he looks like he's got a temper, but it's just relative. But you're right. Everything God does is in grace, because all of creation, he created everything for his purpose and his pleasure. And so if it looks screwy, it's only by appearances, and appearance is everything, right? Reality is nothing, right? Except when you grow up a little bit, you realize that sometimes appearance is not everything. So why did God change?
He didn't. He just had a plan.
God didn't change. He's doing all of this for a purpose. And sometimes we might say he's doing this for our purpose so that we can see things. So why did God destroy folks at Noah's flood? Why did he send the children of Israel out into the wilderness for 40 years? Some things don't look so gracious. Why did God chase Adam and Eve out of the garden before they could eat of fruit? I mean, some things God does that don't look so gracious, but in the larger scope, when you sit back and have a mature set of eyes and see that all is out of him and through him and for him, well, then you can say, oh, I get it. God is really, truly operating in grace. It just doesn't appear it so at the moment, because it looks like chaos, looks like evil. Why did he drown kittens? Because
it doesn't just look like evil; it is evil. But
because God is a dog lover.
But yeah, it doesn't just look like evil; it is evil. But as we know from Isaiah, God creates evil. He uses evil to fulfill his ultimate purposes. Doesn't mean he enjoys it at the time, but he does what he has to do to make things work out for the best for everyone in the long run.
So many people can't understand that God created evil, and they'll go to, I believe, James and say, well, God can't tempt anyone. And that's true. God doesn't tempt anyone, but he uses other people to tempt them, right?
Exactly.
So he himself doesn't tempt anyone, but, he'll use the devil to, tempt you, or some other side force. Remember when God asks the spirits who will deceive King, I forget the Israeli king, what's the word, but one of them volunteered, and then he sent them out to deceive false prophets.
Exactly.
Wait, back up. My mind was wandering. What'd you say?
All right, so there was this Israel, I think not, was it Israel or Judah High King, where he was planning to go to war with one of his neighbors, and what's the word? All the how do you say the real prophet of God, he said, "Don't do it, you'll die." And what's the word? He ignored the real prophet, so God sent a spirit to go to talk to all the other false prophets to deceive him to go and invade his neighbor, and there he died.
Mm-hmm. So, having a kid changes one's point of view. Yeah. I noticed this back when I was in the Gene Edwards local church in Isla Vista in the 70s, early 70s. Oh man, we were all so enthusiastic, totally devoted to our group. Radical, extreme. But by the late 70s, we started having kids. And changing diapers makes you not so zealous. When you have no diapers to change, you are very much prone to being more zealous for the cause. And those stinky diapers, somehow it drives the zeal out of you. You got to deal with stuff and pay the rent, and
It's humbling.
yeah.
I have nothing, so I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. No job, no money, no family.
Uh-huh. Well,
For example, like this week, supposedly according to the Christian prophecy community, this week, the ninth of Av should happen. So, when many of the Christian prophecy channels are all like, all right, this is the week, we're going to get raptured this week. And, there's a lot of excitement, but I wouldn't say I'm not completely unexcited, but at the same time, if it happens, cool. If not, oh well, whatever.
So,
I read that book, Drew. It was a good book.
Yeah.
The books are very short, though.
all right. So I have not read it. Can you guys give me a thumbnail of it?
All right. So, in essence, how do I put this? What's the word? You know how, like, we and this is a concept most people refuse to believe, but how do you put this? That God, in order for his plan to work, needs certain people to do certain sins.
Come a little closer to the mic, okay?
All right. So, how, like, we're sinners, and how do I put this? We have this thing called flesh, and as long as we have this thing called flesh, we're going to be sinners no matter what. We're going to keep on sinning no matter what. And how do I put this? Like, how Christianity tries to sell you that, well, progressively you'll become better and better, and eventually you'll stop sinning altogether. But if you understand you have flesh, and because you have flesh, and because you're dying, you're mortal, you're going to keep sinning. How do I put this? That's not a real, how do I put this, goal, I guess. Drew, if you could take over.
I mean, it's about why we sin in general. The fact that we are all flawed by design by God. The fact that we are sinners was God's original purpose for us, so that we could eventually appreciate what's to come in, quote, eternity, for lack of a better term. It's about the contrast principle. Without contrast of, a black velvet background, you don't appreciate the diamonds as much sitting on that black velvet. So sin is the black background that shows the whiteness of our, to use, for lack of a better term, our eventual vivification and enjoyment of what's to come. And it also goes into detail, from what I recall, about why Adam sinned in the first place. So that was planned by God. Everything that happened was originally planned by God, including Adam's original sin in the garden. It had to happen for God's ultimate purpose to work out in the end. In fact, had Adam not sinned, then that would make God a sinner, because God's plan was for humanity to become mortal and hence sinful, so that Christ could die for our sins. Had Adam not sinned, Christ could never do that, and God's plan would have failed, which is literally the definition of sin, to miss the mark. So if Adam hadn't sinned, God missed the mark. And if God intended for the world to be perfect all along and for sin to never exist, well, look at the world. Sin exists, so again, God would have missed the mark if it wasn't his plan for it to exist in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes into detail on that. From what I recall, it's based on a previous book of his called The Necessity of Sin. So I could be remembering stuff from the original book that may not have made it into
What's the previous book called?
But, it was called The Necessity of Sin. It was based on that book, which it's no longer available. So it's not published anymore anyway. But he basically rewrote it as flawed by design. I'm not sure. I can't recall exactly how much made it into there, but I think most of it did.
Also, most Christians don't really believe in justification, because
that's true.
They believe you can lose your salvation. And if you can lose your salvation, there's no way you can believe in justification at the same time. Being declared righteous, not guilty. What's the word? Sin, and God will not reckon it to your account. God will not account your sins. Not that God doesn't.
Wait a minute. Wait. I love it that you said that most Christians don't believe in justification. And you were right, because I have gone, it's been years since I've dealt with Christians, right? Because I've just been living a quiet life. Right, but online you can go into other Christian chat rooms and chat. And you're right, they hate this idea of all being justified in the cross of Christ. In Romans 5:18 and 19. They just hate it. They change the subject and get the hell out of there as fast as they can. They go back to pardon. You must be pardoned. You must be forgiven.
Yeah, it's the difference between justification and forgiveness, which very few ever really realize.
Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
I just thought that was clever to say they hate justification.
If God is not reckoning your sins if you are justified. If let's say, what would be a sin if you were to steal something? That is a sin. Stealing is a sin, but since you're justified, it's not counted. Right? Compare that to if you sinned and you didn't make atonement, you didn't make things right. Well, now you're screwed. You're doomed. What's the word? How do I put this? You see, most people believe they can lose their salvation, right? So they're always walking the tightrope. They're always walking the straight and narrow. What's the word? If you don't repent of your sins before you die, well, now you're, what's the word? Now you're doomed.
And they have reason to believe that, because that's technically true for Israel. It's just not true under the Gospel of Paul. But they're mixing and matching gospels, trying to merge it into one, bastardized gospel that's not a gospel at all. And that's why they don't understand, that's why you have all these arguments between Christians about once saved, always saved versus losing your salvation. Well, they're both true. You just have to realize which gospel you're under when you're talking about it.
Anyhow, DB Siska, you asked, sin will be justified, so murder will be okay. It'll be okay from God's point of view. God pre-planned it, so it will, what's the word, be justified according to his plan.
There was one murder that's very significant to us, and that is the murder of his son on Golgotha, on Calvary's Hill. That one justifies and is justified. Yikes. What a scary thought, huh?
Yeah, but God ultimately planned the worst murder there was of an innocent person.
Uh-huh.
The only innocent person.
This is the yikes gospel. What are you guys saying? Oh, we're saying the yikes gospel.
I mean, we know.
For example, consider yourself dead to sin. That's what Paul says. People will say that. Well, all right, see, you can't keep on sinning, because if you just keep on sinning, well, now you're not justified. You're not saved. They'll take that and make it to mean the exact opposite. You're dead to sin.
Yeah, that's not what that means.
Sin is dead to you. Sin, because you're justified. Sin is dead to you. The power of sin is dead.
Yeah, to reckon yourself dead to sin means to recognize that you're dead to sin. Sin is no longer an issue for you. It can no longer be lording it over you. Doesn't mean we never sin anymore, relatively speaking, but we do still, we are still dead to sin. It doesn't even matter at the end. Not to say we should sin, but
yes, we should try not to sin.
Yes, but at the end of the day, I don't even say we should try not to sin. We should definitely not try to sin. That was the way I would personally put it. But either way, even if we do sin, grace always super exceeds. Where sin abounds, grace super exceeds.
That's true, Michael. That's true. If we sin, it's because we wanted to. That is true.
Yikes.
The thing about this, most Christians ignore Paul's dilemma about the law.
Yikes.
How do I put this? Think about this. Dang, I lost my thought. When I remember, I'll talk again. Okay, all right. So, what's the word? How to put this? So, remember when Paul was saying, that he is, with the inner man, he delights in the law of God. That when he sins, it's not him sinning, but sin Lord was reigning in me. Let me look up Romans 7 for a moment.
Yeah, another passage.
Well.
All right. Okay, know ye not, brethren, Romans 7, let's start there. Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how the law hath dominion over man as long as he liveth. For the woman which hath an husband is bound by the law to her husband so long as he liveth. But if the husband is dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, while the husband lives, she is married to another man. She shall be called an adulteress. But if her husband is dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. Wherefore, my brethren, ye are also become dead to the law by the body of Christ, that ye should be married to another. All right, so we're dead to the law of Moses. And sin is a transgression of the law, right? And you can't know sin without the law. Now, continue on. Even to him who was raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit to God. For when we were in the flesh, the motions of sins, which were by the law, did our members to bring forth fruit unto death. But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead, wherein we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit, and not in oldness of letter. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin, but by the law, for I had not known lust, except the law said, Thou shalt not covet. But sin, taking occasion by the commandments, wrought in me all manner of conspicuous. For without the law, sin was dead. All right, so before Paul heard the law, since he didn't hear the law, he couldn't sin because, sin is a transgression of the law. Only after you hear the law can you sin. Now, technically, according to the law of Moses, if you sin without knowledge of the law, since the law is written, that is a sin, technically. But anyhow, going on. But sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence. For without the law, sin was dead. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. So think about this. This is Paul's dilemma. The more you focus on the law, the more you try to do a law, try to follow a law, the more you sin. But sin taken occasion by the commandment wrought on me all manner of concupiscence, for without the law sin was dead. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. And the commandment which was ordained to life, I found to be unto death. Sin, taken occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. Wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment is holy and just and good. Was then that which is good made death unto me? God forbid. But sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me, by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceeding sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. Now think about that. That's Paul talking here, right? So DB Cisco, you think the KGB translators are mistranslating Paul?
What did you answer, Alan? I didn't.
All right. Well, DB Cisco says I have read it. It's just another theology-biased translation.
I'm not sure what he means by that. My
Well,
book is
don't
a
know
translation, so I'm not sure what he means.
Well, yeah, all translations are theologically biased if you think about it. But
yeah.
You know, is he saying they're twisting Paul's words? Yeah, I don't know. Anyhow, for which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that I do not. But what I hate, that I do. If then I do that which I would not do, I consent unto the law that is good. Now then it is no more I that do it, but sin dwelleth in me. All right. For I know that in me, that is my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present within me, but not how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. All right, this is Paul the apostle talking, about himself. Now, if I do that I would not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. All right, and he's talking about his flesh. As long as you have that body of flesh, what's the word? You're going to keep on sinning. That body of flesh will keep warring against you.
Yeah, he's personifying sin there, or anthropomorphizing it.
Now, if I do that what I would not, it is no more I that do it. All right, but sin that dwelleth within me. So it's not him that's doing it; it's his flesh that's doing it. Well, I find that the law.
Oh yeah.
What?
Because the him is actually Christ in him, whereas what's doing it is his old and reckoned dead flesh. Sorry, go on.
All right, DB. Okay, DB. So what would you say? The message of Paul versus the message of Peter / Jesus? Is that what you want us to say? All right. I find that the law that when I do, it was present with me. For I delight in the law. I find that a law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into capacity to the law of sin, which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So when with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with my flesh the law of sin.
Is DB still here?
Yeah, DB.
I had a thought that I wanted to share with you, DB, about how God deals graciously with us in many ways. And one of the ways that God deals graciously with us is that we do not wake up one day and we're suddenly, we went to bed and we're 19 years old and we wake up 70 years old, bald and fat. I'll get them for you in a minute, okay? So we don't, God graciously allows us to get old a little bit at a time, so we keep looking in the mirror every day, and we're just getting old a little bit at a time so we don't freak out. Because if we actually looked in the mirror and we went from young, pretty, smooth skin to this old haggardy self that we do become, it would be freak out time. And I think that's gracious of God to do it a little at a time. Anyway, sorry, I'm just
All right.
stream of consciousness.
How do I put this? And I think it is the book of Ephesians that talks about the generation of the Aeon of the Eons. And, based on inferences on certain time statements with the word Aeon, people conclude that the Aeon of the Eons is the fifth Aeon. That is an inference. What's the word? But, it's understandable how people reason it out. Now, think about this. The generation of the Aeon of the Eons. If that inference is true, and if it is being placed correctly at the fifth Aeon, how do I put this? Then we're going to have mortal people growing up and living on the new heaven and new earth. If that inference is true.
Well, on the new earth, anyway.
Yes. If the Aeon of the Eons is not the fourth Aeon, but the fifth Aeon.
The fifth Aeon, exactly.
Assuming this is based on inference. And according to the book of Revelation, and I mentioned this before in other stream, what's the word? There's going to be fruit of the log, or the log of life, or
the leaves on the fruit of the log of life.
Well, there's the fruit and there's the leaves. There's just two different things.
Yeah.
But what's the word? And the fruit of the log of life, or the tree of life, is for if we understand that the tree of life doesn't make one immortal, it just extends your life.
Exactly. You have to partake of it at least once a month, it sounds like.
Yeah. What's the word? If we're interpreting it correctly. And
correct.
The leaves are for the healing of the nations. What's the word? Assuming we're taking that literally. That's not some figure of speech somehow. People can get sick on this new earth. There's still going to be sickness.
Yeah, there'll still be viruses and bacteria out there keeping nature running.
D.B. Cisco, he didn't write the Concordant Bible. What's the word? The Concordant Translation of the Bible, Drew did not write.
No, I definitely did not. No. DB, I have a website called concordantgospel.com. Nothing to do with the concordant literal version of the Bible.
For the concordant publishing concern.
Yeah, and the word concordant means consistent. I have a website. Now, I do use verses from the concordant literal version on occasion, as well as verses from the King James and NIV and Darby Translation and NASB and others. But no, I did.
Did you say the Darby translation?
Yeah. It's a good
I
translation.
didn't know he had
sometimes.
translation.
Oh yeah, he translated the Bible. Yeah, I wrote a separate book on the topic of concordant theology, which is what that book is about, DB. So chapter 1 is about the two gospels and the difference between them. Just happened to, yeah. But yeah, exactly. You were saying there, Alan, about the Aeon.
All right, so there's going to be generations of the Aeon of the Eons. Generations of the Aeon of the Eons. So if we're interpreting, if the inference is correct, that generations of the Aeon of the Eons is the fifth Aeon, new heaven and new earth Aeon, that these are more people. Think about this. A lot of people got dealt a bad hand in life. And I was thinking about this the other day. What's the word? How many people die young, right? What's the word? Die in the womb. What's the word? Are born crippled, are born blind. How many people, what's the word? Are lost, in wars, never get to fill out their dreams. What's the word? If our inferences are correct, that the people who pass the great white throne judgment are mortal, not immortal. Think about this. God is making that up to them. If you never had the chance to grow up and to to get the girl and to marry, in the the fifth eon, you can do it if you think about it.
Presuming you both are resurrected and one of you doesn't end up in the lake of fire, yeah.
Yes, if you pass the Great White Throne Judgment, assuming those who pass the Great White Throne Judgment.
Yeah.
Or mortal, not immortal.
Yeah, the mortals, exactly.
Yeah, because I always, like people will, how the Christians will talk about, how, when you die, now you can't have sex anymore, right? Because when you get resurrected, you'll be this immortal being, and they'll go to Jesus's quote, saying that those in the resurrection neither get married nor are given in marriage, right? So, one of the big tenets of Christianity is, if you don't get married in this life, well, now you're screwed forever, right? If you want that, right? But think about this: if those who pass the Great White Throne Judgment are immortal, they're not immortal, so they can still get married, they can still have kids, So
yeah.
It's
well,
still
Paul mentioned all the generations of the Aeon of the Eons.
Yes. We, for example, we look at those people who are born blind or they're born crippled, so they can't have kids or get married. Well, God made it up to them. God's going to make it up to them. And not only is God going to make it up to them, God is going to make it up to them in the best place possible. If you think about it, the best government would be to be mortal under would be the government of the fifth Aeon. If you want to understand that will be an Aeon of grace. Instead of being under the law of Moses, you're going to be under grace. But we'll see.
Yeah, speaking of the fifth Aeon and all that is actually when Ace was going over the chart at the beginning of this video, it reminded me of some thoughts I was having on that, or it gave me some thoughts on that topic. I tend to hear a lot of street preachers here in Toronto because I live down the street from the most preached on corner in the world, Yonge and Dundas.
Really?
Oh yeah, Yonge and Dundas. So I hear a lot of them preaching. They're always going on about, your final chance is to accept the gospel. Otherwise, it's the lake of fire forever. It's either heaven or hell / the lake of fire forever, and that's the only chance. That's not even remotely close to a scriptural eschatology. I mean, even if we cut out Paul's administration of grace, let's say hypothetically that had never been a part of God's plan, at the end of the day, there still would have been a resurrection, just as Daniel talked, or the angel talked to Daniel about. And some would be resurrected to Aeonian life, meaning they get to live through that final Aeon, and some would even get to live through the fourth Aeon. But there's also, basically everyone was still going to be resurrected, but some would die a second time in the lake of fire, and they'd simply cease to exist. It's not about torture, but many people would go on as simple mortals on the new earth and just live forever there. They wouldn't be immortal, but they wouldn't be mortal anyway either anymore, because they wouldn't be dying thanks to partaking in the tree of life or the log of life. It's just that we also have grace. So that's about mercy. I think that was the second one that Ace was showing on that chart. Those who did good could go and live on the new earth as mortals. That's not salvation. Christians always think that salvation has to do with getting to live again. No, that's just those who do good. Paul talked about in Romans, it's talked about in all throughout the Hebrew scriptures, it's talked about in Revelation. They would get to live on the new earth as mortals. Salvation has to do with immortality. And that's something basically no Christian understands. Salvation is entirely, at least from the absolute perspective, about immortality and hence sinlessness. There's no chance of sinning anymore because we'll be truly immortal, and it's not something to ever have to worry about. And that's what the grace is. So while mercy is offered to those who do good, and those who repent and what have you, the grace is given to everyone. As they said, God is operating in grace under the administration of grace, and at the end of the eons, every single human who ever lived will finally experience that grace, and that's what makes it grace. We'll all be made immortal at the consummation of the eons. But even if that had never happened, humanity would still go on as, there still would be that resurrection, because that was written about long before Paul ever talked about his gospel.
So, Drew, isn't that a fine contrast to say that mercy is offered, but grace is an operation?
Exactly. It's like it's the difference between forgiveness and justification as well. The pardon and justification. Even with mercy or forgiveness, you can earn mercy to a certain degree. Just like the man who had a debt and begged his debtor for forgiveness, and the debtor, or not the debtor, whoever he owed the debt to, for forgiveness. And
one reason I think this is so hard for people to grasp is because it's easy to understand an offer of mercy, and it's hard. It's just hard to understand that God would be absolutely gracious, no strings attached. What the hell is going on? I don't trust this. Yeah.
It really is.
And the grace is given to everyone. Just some of us experienced it earlier. That's all.
Yes. God has his favorites.
Exactly. Not due to anything we did, of course, to earn it.
Years ago, before the Marx Brothers became famous, they set up a table in downtown New York and offered to give away $5 bills. That's when a $5 bill was actually worth something, right? There's been so much inflation that the $5 bill is probably worth maybe $25 at the moment. Anyway, but they were giving them away, and they could not give them away. People were suspicious of it. They thought there was some deal, some strings attached. They couldn't give away $5 bills.
Guys, I want to continue talking about the generation of the Eon of the Eons, actually.
Okay.
How about this? I think about this. If you're growing up on the fifth Aeon, right? How do I put this? There was going to be ruled by not only immortals, but it's going to be the best time to grow up, if you think about it.
As far as mortals go, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, Anyway, I had a thought, but I lost it. Oh well.
I'm sure it'll come back.
Yeah, it will, and then I'll have to interrupt again.
Well, I have to start getting ready for bed anyway, so we'll have one less person interrupting you. You all have a good evening.
Okay. So you were wanting to explore, Alan, the final eon of time.
Yeah.
The eon of the eons.
Yes.
And the only thing we really know about the eon of the eons is that it does say that there are generations, plural, in that eon. So at least 2 generations will happen in that eon. Maybe many more.
That is assuming that generations means that people are going to be having kids. It could just mean there's a whole bunch of people from different times, perhaps. Maybe that's what it means. It's as I said before, it's an inference.
Right.
Michael Thunder, it's a maybe. It's a maybe. If you make it to the Eon of the Eons, and if they are still mortal, and if generations of the Eons means that they're having kids instead of just being a diverse allotment of people from different ages. There are a lot of inferences here.
Also, we lost Drew.
Yeah.
Good night, Drew.
Good night, Drew.
You're a good egg.
Oh, man.
I don't care what Mayor Como says about you.
Specifically, during the 4th Eon, they were under the law of Moses. And that ends in spectacular failure. Right. That ends with everyone rising up to wage war against Jesus.
Right.
And that was, to demonstrate, I believe, this is an inference of mine, what's the word, that, even under perfect circumstances, even when you have God himself, or God's visible image, the Son of God, what's the word, ruling and reigning on planet Earth, people still, they can't do it, right? They can't, what's the word, keep the law. Even then, right? Even then, trying to keep the law keeping fails spectacularly. So then we can get to the fifth Aeon, where instead of, what's the word, ruling by the law, we're going to be ruling by grace. For the people on Earth, from what I understand, this is an inference of mine, but from what I can see, from what I'm seeing right now, they're going to be ruled, under grace. Because think about this: kids being raised during the fifth Aeon, if kids are being raised in the fifth Aeon, they're not going to be under the law, because the law was tried, tested, and failed. Right?
Right. It fails under the fourth Aeon. And I think that's a perfect explanation of how, shall we say, the free willers say we can do it. We can pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. And God shows us there's no way. There's 10, 11 different administrations that all end in failure. And the only one that ends in success is the grace administration, because there's no strings attached, or hopping over to the fullness of the Son of God in the 12th administration.
Exactly. The only thing that will work is grace. And we're right now going through these alien times to come to that conclusion. Nothing will work but grace. Communism was tried, it failed. Neoliberalism was tried, it's failing. It's failing right now. Globalism has been tried, it's failing. Feudalism was tried, it failed. What's the word? Fascism was tried, it failed. Monarchy is tried, failed. What's the word? The law of Moses, with giving people perfect law, was tried, it failed. People following their conscience without what's the word? Governments. Before the flood of Noah, there were no governments; there were just families. That was tried, failed. Everything failed. The only thing that can work is grace. We're going through this long-winded, journey to come to that conclusion. So that everyone can say, yeah, the only thing that can work is grace.
Right there, grace, baby. Because there's no deal. It's no covenant. It's a new covenant. No strings attached.
Think about this. God is working towards that, right? This is what God wants to do all along. If you think about it, just think about this. If the Aeon of the Eons inference, this is our inference, is the fifth Aeon, and if generations of the Aeon of the Eons, means that people are going to be having kids. If that's the case, think about this. How many kids are going to be had during the fifth Aeon? If that's the case, I would imagine there'd be more people born, during the fifth Aeon than any other Aeon. If generations of the Aeon of the Eons means what we think it means. So maybe perhaps the majority of humanity will be born during this time.
Mercy.
Wow.
Did I say mercy? I meant grace.
Because how many people have been born right now? 100 billion? Collectively? Maybe not. I don't know. But if our presuppositions, they can be wrong, this is dependent on many inferences, but if our presuppositions are right, then how many people will be born on the new Earth? Maybe 1 trillion? I don't know. We know that there's going to be nations.
So, Alan, I have a compliment for you, Alan.
Go ahead.
You're like Adley Loudy. Because earlier in today's show, Tony said Adlai Lowdy was chart happy, and you're kind of like that. You have this mind that wants to organize things in such a way as to grasp them in such a way. And so, if Adlai Lowdy was chart happy, you're kind of like that. You like charts. You like mapping things out and understanding time periods and links and so forth.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
I didn't even know you were teaching until I reached out. Well, DB got my cell number and he sent me a text and he sent me like 8 or 9 questions that he wanted me to ask you.
DB has your cell number?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't even know that Alan was preaching. So you want to answer these 8 questions? I can read them off to you.
Go ahead.
I'm just playing. I'm just giving you a hard time. Go ahead. I'm loving. I heard that comment about, yeah, I guess I'll make it. I can make it through no more interruptions. I'm sorry, Alan. I enjoy you going through this. I'll just shut up and go ahead, man. I'm really enjoying this. Go ahead. I never thought about kids getting to have a second chance. That's mind blowing.
It is a mind blowing thought.
I have a daughter. I have a daughter that lost. I actually was there that night, and she lost her stillborn at 9 months, and it was horrendous. I mean, and she's been wrestling with that, and what's going to happen? Does she get gypped? Just a whole bunch of unanswered questions, especially when you mix Christianity and their, crazy answers. So I was thoroughly enjoying what you were pointing out. So I just want to tell you that. Thanks.
Yeah, because right now in Christianity, the hope for those kinds of instances is the age of accountability. And they say, well, if you die before you're 13 years old, you go straight to heaven. There's one problem with that. There's no age of accountability taught in the Bible. This doctrine was never laid out by any apostle. The best thing you can get is Jesus likes kids. That's it, right? Jesus likes children, and in order to enter into the kingdom of heaven, you have to humble yourself like a child. But nowhere in the Bible is the doctrine of the age of accountability laid out didactically.
Yeah, I was also taught that a good children's pastor gets kids, that those kids then get parents. Anyways.
Yeah, and so, right now, according to Christianity, well, when the rapture happens, all the aborted babies and all the dead kids, they're going to go up to heaven when the rapture happens. But, there's one problem. None of them believe the gospel. That's what's part of, these dead babies, they can't believe because they're babies. Babies can't believe. Same thing, No.
And that's what I mean. They use the kids to hopefully get the parents that they could save. The kids were just always going to heaven.
But knowing what we do now, there's going to be a great white throne judgment. And, the way Christianity sells the great white throne judgment, it's the great white trick, right? God brings you into the great white throne to basically show you that you're doomed. Maybe give you a chance to plead for mercy, but no mercy will be had. And pretty much everyone that goes to the great white throne goes to hell. I've seen many people try to teach that. You can try to argue your case before God, but, since the law or the great white throne, you have to be perfect in order to meet God's standard of righteousness. And no one is perfect, therefore everyone who gets before the great white throne dies. That's how they reason it. It's just, a chance to make your case, but in the end, really, they're all doomed. By teaching that, you completely, annul the scriptures, right? Now, is that a possibility? Perhaps, but I just don't see it. I just don't believe it. I believe, when people are judged by their works, it really means they'll be judged by their works, And from my reading of the text, I believe many people will pass the great white throne judgment. And if you're a kid, it's pretty much, what could a kid done to merit not passing the great white throne judgment?
Holy crap. I did shoot a robin with a pellet gun. It's horrible.
Horrible.
horrible. I shot
Yeah,
a
I've seen-
possum in the wrong
I've seen-
spot.
What's the word? I've seen people lower the age of accountability down to 7 or 8. You know, well, all right, if that 8-year-old kid was a thief, he's going straight to hell when he dies. You know, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. The things they say in churches.
We would have kids come up and ask those questions. We had to ask Miss Shauna, and they'd ask sounds like crazy, macabre questions about hell and who's burning and all that. But anyways, go ahead, Ace.
Oh, I was wanting Happy-Go-Lucky to come in and tell us about his experience with that Love Covered Life channel. Because he used to listen to it. I just thought we'd get some feedback there on why he did listen to it, what he learned, and why he stopped, and so forth. So there's your little invitation, Happy-Go-Lucky. Come on in, baby.
Speaking of the 5th Aeon, in the book of Revelation, it says that, what's the word? The saints will be ruling for the eons of the eons, if I'm remembering correctly. Now, when that is said, are they including Eon 4? You know, so that would be plural, or are they talking about just the future? In that case, we could have even a 6th Aeon, which no one even knows about. Just a possibility. Speculation here, friends.
Wow.
So you're saying there might be another Eon after that?
Yeah, you know, because if that phrase in the book of Revelation, are they including Eon 4 when they say the saints are ruling for the eons of the eons? You know, because if they are, well, all right, they ruled for 1,000 years, and then they rule on the new heaven and new earth. But if they're not including the 1,000 years, well, then now they're ruling on the new heaven and new earth, that Aeon, and then there could even be another one after that.
Yeah, it's not clear, not as clear as we'd like it.
No. All I know is that in the end, God has to be all in all. That's all I know. In the end. Yeah, so maybe what's the word for those growing up in New Heaven, New Earth, they'll have to deal with a whole other problem. Who knows? I have no clue. Yeah. I don't think so. You know, I think I'm leaning more towards 5 Aeons, but there could be more. We'll see.
Well, sir. If you don't know what to say, you say, well, sir.
Well, sir. Anthony Pierce, what do you mean by it seems we have all listened to the same people? Anyhow, because there's the thing about this, and if our assumptions are right that under the 5th Aeon it's going to be ruled by grace, you know, think about this. Like, how do I put this? You know, everyone had to what's the word? In order to get onto a new heaven, new earth, you had to go through the Great White Throne Judgment, right? For the most part, if you weren't already made immortal before then, or saved before then, you'd have to go through be raised back to life and go through the Great White Throne Judgment. And then if you pass the Great White Throne Judgment, then you get to live on the new heaven, new earth. You know, but how do I put this? You know, so you know, and one problem with how do I put this? One of my thoughts was, well, all right, well, what judgment are the people going to be that were born on the new heaven, new earth? If our inference about the generations of the Eon of the Eons is correct, what judgment are they going through? But if you think about it, since that's the era of grace or the Eon of grace, there's no need for judgment, right? There's no need for judgment since, well, it's an Aeon of grace. You know, if you're under grace, you're not under condemnation. So, you know, maybe there's not even a need for a Great White Throne Judgment for those who are born on the new heaven, new earth, because they're under the Aeon of grace. Those born on the new heaven, new earth. But we'll see. This is all speculation on my part.
Interesting.
Yeah. God, after demonstrating nothing else will work but grace, and this is what he's been working towards. This is what he wanted.
So during that eon, Alan, are you saying that that there'll be people here with like terrestrial bodies that are stuck here, and we'll have a body that can, I guess, I would suppose, since we're up there in a celestial. I'll sound crazy talking about this, by the way.
I don't feel crazy at all. You're on the cutting edge, mate. You are on the cutting edge. What's the word?
But is that how it's going to be? I mean, are we going to have different bodies where we can go back and forth? I mean, that would make us like
Jesus could go back and forth between heaven and earth.
Right. So we're literally going to be like what we're seeing in movies now. I definitely claim Iron Man if that's a persona or something. I'm just telling you, it's logged right now. I get that suit.
All right,
is that what you're saying? But is that? I mean, think about that. Is that what's going to be the relationships we have with the people here? We're going to be back and forth.
Well, there are some statements in Paul's epistles that seem to indicate that the body of Christ will interact with people on heaven. I mean, people on earth as well. And we also know that heaven has jurisdiction over the earth. So, remember that video from Martin Zender, what's the word? If you're in the body of Christ, you're at a higher level than even the apostles. That sounds like blasphemy, right? That sounds like there's no way that could be the case. But maybe, maybe, since you're in heaven and that's celestial jurisdiction, heaven is over earth,
right.
Maybe.
And then since go ahead.
We outrank them in a sense.
And since we know that God does not have this mishmash of intertwined hoopla of time, all no beginning, no end, and splatted, and that's it, like it's done deal. Then who knows what's to come? These positions of glory and doing something awesome and everything. I would think that there'd always be a new adventure.
I don't know, man. I feel like there's a conclusion. When God's all in all, I'm guessing that's it. God wins.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, then there would be no other groups if he's all in all. He's all in all. There's no reason now I guess.
All right, DB Cisco. Here we believe that there are two evangelists. I can be wrong about that, but here we believe that there are two gospels and that there are two groups called to two distinct missions. You have the gospel of the circumcision, and they rule on earth. The 12 apostles rule the 12 tribes of Israel. And Israel and the Jews, they rule on earth. And then you have the body of Christ, and they rule in heaven. And just as the Jews throughout the next two aeons try to reconcile those on earth to God during the next two aeons. Likewise, the body of Christ is called to rule and reign in heaven. Well, DB, we can go through the scriptures where Paul teaches this, but you don't care about Paul. This is a Pauline doctrine.
Okay, I thought I wanted to read this section of this chart. Seems important to our understanding. If I can just control it here. It says this section of the calendar exhibits the course God has taken as a result of Israel's blindness and apostasy. Well, who would have thought that Israel would be blind and apostate? The kingdom is again proclaimed to Israel, through whom the nations are to be blessed. It is rejected, proclaimed again to the dispersion at Rome, and still rejected. The kingdom and God's counsels for the earth are put in abeyance, awaiting the consummation of the present secret economy when they continue. Waiting the present abeyance. Is that what it said? Yeah. They are put in abeyance, awaiting the consummation of the present secret economy when they continue. When this section is hidden by folding or otherwise, it exhibits the course God would have taken had not Israel rejected their message. Blessings for Israel first, then through them the nations. Oh, I get it. So what it's talking about is this little red line here, and then this line here. So if you take this calendar and fold it so that you're hiding these three administrations here, right? Then you'll see the big old plan God had for Israel if Israel had not rejected and turned to apostasy. But now, because they did reject, we have God's revelation that he's going to be gracious to all.
We are on the cutting edge, mate. That's what I believe. You know, how do I put this? Like, what's the word? Like, I remember I was reading, what's the word? A history book on, what's the word? The communist takeover of Russia. And, you know, before Lenin and Stalin were the rulers of Russia, they were just ordinary dudes, you know, sitting and talking to each other, right? Plotting the overthrow of the government. You know, same way, you know, right now, here we are, just ordinary dudes, you know, and one day, you know, we'll be ruling and reigning with Christ in heaven. Right now, we're just ordinary schmucks. Nothing special about us. You know, likewise, you know, 12 apostles, they're just ordinary dudes. Yeah, but one day they're going to be ruling the 12 tribes of Israel, being on 12 thrones.
Well, that's a great analogy. Okay, so on this chart right here, it says, the truth for today is this, that grace reigns, not sin or law or justice. So at various times, there will be, there's times when sin reigns and the law reigns and justice reigns. But right now, grace reigns. God is conciliated to all mankind while Israel is apostate. Believers are justified and reconciled, not pardoned or sins atoned. All blessings are spiritual and heavenly. They're not physical or on the earth. Oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that worth pondering?
Indeed.
Indeed.
You know what I find fascinating, Ace? Think about this.
What?
You know, this is the only stream. This is the only YouTube channel I know that regularly streams and streams Paul's evangel or Paul's message, right? And what's the word? You know, think about this. Like in the chat, we have two guys who are heavily into Judaism, Jewish law, DB Cisco and New Genesis Connection. You know, how to put this? You know, like Paul back in his day had to deal with Judaizers and his ecclesias or his groups. And today, out of nowhere, we have some Judaizers. Not that we're insulting them, but you know, wherever this message of what's the word, Paul's evangel is preached, somehow, some way, there's always going to be someone to preach the gospel of the circumcision.
That's hilarious.
Wow, what an observation.
Come to preach the gospel of the circumcision.
That's hilarious.
You know, because this is a very obscure stream.
Wow, what an observation.
Come to preach the
Happy-go-lucky. I turned your mic off so that you would have time to go over to YouTube and put a stop to that feedback we're getting, because you're now on StreamYard, you're not on YouTube, but YouTube is still open. That's why we're getting feedback.
Yep, cool.
Got it. Thank you. Howdy.
Hey, hi all. How are you?
Fine.
You're
Hey
looking
there.
well. Looking well. G'day, Jeremy, Alan. Really appreciate you guys.
Same.
Well, New Genesis Connection. How do I put this? Ace, can you bring up the comments on screen? Yes, absolutely. Jesus preached the Jewish message unto Jews. Jesus was a minister of the circumcision. What's the word? To confirm the patriarchal promises of God. Jesus was not. Well, I wouldn't say he didn't reveal anything new, but Jesus was sent to confirm what was already laid out by the prophets in the Old Testament. People, as again, New Genesis Connection, and we know here that people try to mix Paul's message of faith apart from the law, or salvation apart from the law, and Jesus's message of, obey the law. Think about this. I remember one guy asked Jesus, what must I do to inherit Aeonian life? Age-abiding life. And Jesus says, keep the commandments. And I remember a Christian quoted that to me. But think about this. I know that Christian believed in mixing Paul and Jesus. But if you think about it in that context, when Jesus is saying keep the commandments, which commandments is he talking about? The law of Moses, right? He's not talking about, well, just love people and be kind and you'll be fine. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. The commandments, he was speaking to a Jewish guy, and he would have known those commandments are the law of Moses. Jesus didn't do away with the law of Moses, didn't speak bad about the law of Moses. What's the word? Anyhow.
On a different topic, happy-go-lucky.
Hey,
Tell us what you were learning over there on Love Covered Life.
I think you covered a lot of it on your program the other night. But it was just getting very mystical sort of stuff. But she, her name's Melissa, I believe, and she was very much into salvation for all. And I think she was doing book readings as well. She wanted to do book readings with a group of people and cover books by Thomas Talbot. I think it was Thomas Talbot and other people on eternal, on universalism, basically. But she was, she was good to watch for a time and for a season, I suppose. And she seemed very down to earth, but at the same time, she was getting into this mystical stuff. And I heard someone commented that she was into out of body experiences, which is the way some of these people go. I've seen people go that way before. On, not that I know, but people online and without digressing too much. Yeah.
All right. What's the word? Can you bring up DB's last comment on the screen?
I reckon.
And certain men from James.
Well, we've gone through the answer to this question before. It's because Jesus died, all men will be saved. It's the exact opposite. It's because Jesus died and defeated death for all that all men will be saved from sin and death. We inherited death from Adam, and because we are dying, we sin. Jesus came to defeat sin and death for us, and he did it by living a perfect, sinless life, dying on the cross for us, and being dead for 3 days, no consciousness whatsoever, being in that tomb for 3 days, and after 3 days and nights, he was raised back to life by God his Father. And thanks to that, what's the word? Since he defeated death for us, now we all one day be made sinless by being justified, and he who is justified can no longer sin, because God does not reckon sin unto their account, and we all one day be immortal. He who is immortal, cannot die. So the entire problem is solved. We are dying, and because we are dying, we sin. Now, thanks to Jesus, we will be made immortal. So no longer can we die, and also we will be made justified. So no longer can we sin.
Okay, back to you, Tony. Back to you.
Sure.
So, what made you leave the channel, Love Covered Life?
Well, actually, I found Martin Zender through the Y guy, and
What's the Y guy about?
I only saw one or two episodes on the on YouTube of his, and he'd written a couple of books I'd seen. He'd written a couple of books he was promoting on his site, but then he just mentioned Zender in a list of people. For some reason, I just went after. I looked up Martin Zender, and yeah, I can't remember exactly what I first heard from Martin Zender, but I remember seeing him do a show on the Trinity where he just takes to a sign that says the Trinity and he just smashes it to pieces. And I thought that was good theology.
Yeah, that was great theology. Fantastic theology.
Yeah. He could have quoted all the verses from Paul's opening epistles, the opening of Paul's epistles, but instead he just took to it. I can't remember exactly. He smashed it. He drove something through it or something. I can't remember. But he just annihilated this sign that said the Trinity, and I don't know. It was just it wasn't long after that just really came into the way, the understanding of the two gospels and the circumcision and the uncircumcision gospels, and that just blew me away. But it just made so much sense, and just kept plodding along, and come across Ace Theological School at the front of the yellow pages. And, changed my life.
All right, I'd like to answer two questions in the chat. All right, so
certain men from James came again.
All right, New Genesis Connection. Could you bring up New Genesis Connections comment? All right. What's the word? When Jesus said, "Go and sin no more," how would you know what is sin except through the law? Sin is a transgression of the law. If there is no law, there is no sin. Anyhow.
Well, and of course, New Genesis, he meant don't do that anymore. But she is an Israelite. That's their message. Don't sin anymore. Follow the law. It's not Paul's message. But then we get back to, and certain men from James came. Because you know what we believe.
Wow. Okay.
All right.
Why did certain men from James come into Antioch? They wanted to spy out our freedom.
They didn't like people not following the law.
I'll tell you why they wanted to spy out our freedom. Because it pisses them off that we're not browbeating ourselves over the beer we drink.
Or others. They're afraid that since we're not doing that and telling others that you need not worry about that because of Christ, that we might be actually jeopardizing their eternal soul. That's how they justify this. It's rule keeping. It's rule following. It's get in line. It's lick my boots.
All right. Someone in the chat asked, "Are Neanderthals saved?" Well, if you watched our video on the soul, what's the word? our teaching, where we went through instances of the word nefesh in the Old Testament, you would know that if it's alive, it has a soul, right? And Jesus came to defeat death. So, this is a possibility, but I believe it. If it moves, if it moves, then it is a soul, a living soul. And Jesus came to defeat death. So I would assume that yes, the Neanderthals are saved.
I've met some of them. I have my doubts.
You've been to New Jersey?
Yeah. You're bad.
Ivan, we go so you said so all sentient beings are saved. What's the word? If you knew about Paul's gospel talks about, well, I wouldn't say he doesn't talk about it in his early writings, but in his later writings, he talks about the salvation of heaven. What's the word? Jesus came to reconcile heaven and earth. So, not just is he reconciling all sentient beings on planet Earth, he's reconciling all sentient beings throughout the universe. Here in this channel, we believe even the devil will one day come into the kingdom of heaven. That's how far we go.
Yeah.
What's wrong? I mean, what's wrong with Christ getting all the glory? I don't understand. Like, why? Why is that like no good?
People enjoy the doctrine of eternal torment. People love it. People love the idea of their enemies, the people they don't like, being tortured forever and ever and ever. As long as it's the people I don't like and not me, then yeah, torture them forever. A lot of people have hard hearts. For example, yesterday I was talking to a dude on YouTube, and I brought up that the notion that, Jesus is Lord, the complement of a Lord is a slave. So in the end, everyone will be Jesus' obedient slave. And he was angry at it. What's the word? But, the idea of Jesus being master over all, Lord of all, and that everyone obeying Jesus was more horrifying to him than people being tortured forever for all eternity.
Why? Why would people do that?
Because it's carnal. It's carnality. People would rather people be burned in hell for all eternity, as long as their free will is intact, than Jesus. What's the word? Beating people into submission.
I would think that if you would say Jesus is Lord of all, then will be subjected to him, and the concept of subjected is kind of like slavery. I think that they would just raise an eyebrow and say, I need to think about this. This sounds interesting, because it does say Jesus is Lord of all. So how would I fit that into my thinking?
Well, it's very simple. It's very simple. This is what he does. Whenever I presented a verse, the verse was figurative. It wasn't literal. That's all he did. Well, that verse is out of context. Checkmate, fucker. All right. Well, all right. That's figurative language here. It's not real. Checkmate, fucker. There's no winning. There's no win. Whenever you present a verse, figurative, symbolic, out of context. Checkmate, checkmate, checkmate. What's the word? How do I put this? Not God has not given everyone eyes to see, and you can show them the verse. I spent like 2 days with this dude, showing him verse after verse after verse after verse after verse. He just couldn't see it. He couldn't see anything. For example, what's the word? I'll quote instances of Jesus, saying, "You shall not get out till you pay the last farthing." Oh, well, that's a metaphor. That's not really literal. But the eternal torment or eternal damnation above, all right, that's literal. They whatever they want, that's what they get. God hasn't given them eyes to see or ears to hear. Not for all is the faith, sadly. Some people just can't get it. It's not their time to get it. They are locked up into stubbornness, you know. And when you deal with people, you know, you come to, how do I put this? You realize how stubborn people are. You can show them the facts. You can show them the proof. You can show them the verses. Won't work if God doesn't give them eyes to see.
Mercy. That's what we say when we don't know what else to say. Mercy.
Ace, do you find that to be true?
There's a lot of stubbornness out there, and of course, you know, we fall back on this big idea that God locks up all together in stubbornness, and it just seems frightful that a lot of people can't put two and two together, that they're actually worshiping themselves because they think that they are obedient. They think that they deserve God's mercy, and maybe they do, but incorporated into that feeling that God owes me because I could have slept with Sally and I didn't, therefore God should reward me or whatever, then that with that comes this you're looking down your nose at everybody else who did sleep with Sally and you're better than them. It's just really primal. It's immature.
Well,
You know, it's like a little 5-year-old, little 12-year-old who is sure that she knows everything and is better than everyone else. I would never do that. I've heard 12-year-olds preach the gospel of should. They would tyrannize by should. You should not do that. You should do this. What the hell does a 12-year-old know about complex reality and life and cultural nuances?
Seems to be a part of the programming puzzle. It's like necessary. I think we all share an experience of believing, getting duped, and donating time and all.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing when Black Lives Matter. If they see you with a MAGA hat, they'll beat the shit out of you. They even might kill you, and then cheer for themselves that they did something great. They killed some guy wearing a MAGA hat. What the hell is that? It's that same self-righteous bullshit. I'm better than you because I followed this list of rules. I'm so proud of myself because I pray 3 times on Sunday and I go to the right church. I'm part of the right club.
I guess I guess others could hear us. I keep seeing, how's my mic? All right?
Yeah.
I keep seeing DB comment, that we keep doing the same thing, that we're criticizing him. And I guess in a way it could come off that we're saying that we belong to the right club and, we want you in here and yeah, you're wrong. But we're not saying that if you don't get in here or you don't become a member, that our leader is going to torture you forever. That's the main, and we're not saying that we're better. We're all saying that, hey, it's all Christ, that we can't even believe these stupid things without him showing us. We can't have faith. We can't have nothing. And consequently, if you follow that logic, then sin can't stop us from doing what Christ is doing, since he's the one doing it all.
All right. I'd like to say something. A New Justice Connection said, well, didn't Jesus use parables to teach? Well, he did, but he also used parables to, to hide the truth from others. Matthew 13:10 through 14. And the disciples came and said to him, why speakest thou unto them in parables? Why are you talking in parables, Jesus? Verse 11. He answered and said to them, because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. For whoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have more abundance. But whosoever has not, from what he has, it will be taken away from him, even what he has. Therefore I speak to them in parables, because they seeing see not, and hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. And it is fulfilled, and in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, saying, by hearing ye shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall not perceive. So the purpose of the parable is actually to hide the truth from those who are not worthy or those who are not chosen. And a lot of people are not
To come
chosen.
in first. Yeah, to come in first. They're still going to be fixed.
Yes, Jesus did say something like that, didn't he? You were not ready then, and you are not still ready. Thank you,
What do you
Richard.
have? What do you have if you take out those 13 letters and you're just stuck with the four Gospels and what, Peter and James? What do you have if you're a Gentile?
Depression.
I mean, what's the conclusion?
Confusion.
What the heck is the conclusion?
One of the brothers who greatly influenced my thinking.
Who's that?
We talk about Enoch and Adler Laudy and Jim Coram, Dean Huff, and Martin Zinder, but there's this other guy he never gained much popularity, and his name was Will Powell. And I put some of Will Powell's letters up on the Ace Theological website, right? And Will Powell's son committed suicide because they were in a fundamentalist, works-oriented church. And this church was preaching how that you must please God. And in the very next breath, they were preaching that there's no way that you can please God. And so this son of Will Powell, and I think he was an adult, he wasn't just 13. I think it was at least 20, maybe 30 years old. I don't know how old he was, but I think he was an adult. But he just got depressed at the message of the James Gang style Christianity, because they kept saying you must do thus and so, or else God will not be happy with you. And he couldn't do all of the thus and so business. He got depressed about it and took his own life. And Will Powell, it depressed him that his own son took his own life. And over the years, in his retirement years, he took it upon himself to write letters to ministers, and he would structure his letters to say, "Dear Reverend so-and-so, is my son in hell?" Because he took his own life. And so his goal was to get a letter exchange between him and the ministers. And he wrote to everybody, including Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell. And anyway, he in the 90s, he would send me copies of his letters. I must have 200 or maybe 300 of his letters. And they're wonderful and passionate, and I just love them. But my point in bringing up his story is that the James Gang, they're awful, man. Just because they think that they keep the law and they preach that you should not steal, but they get caught stealing. How do they handle it? I don't know. They have to come up with some type of argument in their mind, their bad behavior. And it's really common in human nature to justify yourself. It takes a lot of immaturity to do that. Oh, don't blame me. I was just tempted. What? You were just teaching and preaching that thou shalt not steal. You get caught stealing. And what's your excuse? Well, don't blame me. I had to steal some to take care of the poor, or whatever the story is, right? You teach not to be committing adultery and you get caught in bed with salad. So, and then you teach that if you don't keep the law 100%, you don't submit, you don't obey, you're screwed. God is not going to be happy with you. And some people get like Will Powell's son. They get depressed over the damn thing. And like Janet Cole, I remember reading it way back in the 80s. This woman named Janet Cole killed her children before they reached the age of accountability, to make sure that they would go to heaven, because she knew the chances of them keeping the law, obeying the James Gang rules, there's no way. She probably looked at her own self and said, I slept with Fred, and these kids are Fred's kids, and he's not even my husband, or whatever she said. But she was in the news for a day or two because she killed her children to spare them from eternal conscious punishment in hell. And Will Powell was understandably grieving, seriously grieving over his son, who killed himself because he could not handle the James Gang message from this free will church. I think the word free will is actually in the church name, like Free Will Baptist or something, I don't know. But they just made a mess of his mind, and they didn't preach that God is being gracious to all and God has a purpose. And this stuff does look awful at the moment, but it will make sense. And I just hate it that the James Gang can drive people crazy with this crap. It drove me crazy. It drove everybody. It drove you crazy, didn't it, Alan?
Yeah.
When you were sure that you could never please God, but you must please God.
Well, you can't be ever sure you're really saved, so you just got to keep doing good works, and by your good works you can know, well, I'm in it or not if I'm behaving myself,
I mean, am I the only one that had responded to multiple altar calls for repentance? And
Oh, I did too.
My gosh,
Multiple baptisms.
just crazy.
Yeah, it's not that like Will Powell lost his son in the Vietnam War. No, he lost his son to bullshit church teaching.
You can never please that Jesus in that church ever. I mean, maybe for a few days, and get it really good.
Well,
and you had to be sinless.
Well, guys, the circumcision gospel is not that bad. Let's just be. It's not that bad. It is that bad when you mix Christianity with it. Then it's horrible. But in and of itself, it's not that bad. When you mix the circumcision evangel with be tortured forever or all eternity, and you try to mix it with the great, you get this bastard gospel. But it's not that. It's not that bad. People are going to make it under circumcision evangel. There will be people who make it. It's not like no one makes it.
That's a very good point, Alan. It's a very good point. I had never thought about it that way.
Well, at the end of the day, this is really all designed by God, even this opposition, and it's good.
What's the word? Let's remember Luke chapter 12. When Jesus comes back, what's the word? He finds for the slave that did his will, he enters into the kingdom and is made chief of certain things. For the slave that knew his master's will but didn't do it, many blows. For the slave that didn't know his master's will and didn't do it, a few blows. And in the context of the Mosaic Law and the context of slavery in the Mosaic Law, a few blows, that's a max of 40 lashes. So not infinite, unending torture or punishment. I still think they make it into the kingdom. They just get punished first. What that punishment is, I don't know. Whether it's figurative or literal, who knows? And for the slave that completely did nothing and apostatized and began to live like the world, he is cast out to live with the hypocrites. So there's a gradient in the circumcision gospel. It's not, as Christianity teaches, all right, you committed one sin, now God's going to torture you forever, unless you repent. There is mercy even in the Mosaic Law. And there's mercy even in the circumcision. And there's grace even in the circumcision gospel.
Anyway, God bless Will Powell and his son. But you have to know that Will Powell's son is not the only one who was depressed over that whole model of it, filtering information through, as you say, Alan, a mixture of Judaizing and eternal conscious punishment bullshit.
Indeed. Well, Ace, if you have anything else to say, it's been 2 hours.
Well, that's surprising. That was pretty fun. It went by rather fast. I didn't know that it was 2 hours.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to last so long either. It looked like you had something to say, something planned to say, but you lost track of it or something.
I just wanted to show.
You brought up God's operations of grace.
I wanted to show that God's operation of grace is not the same as God's offer of grace. That was my biggest point. And I think it's a mistake for us to say God offers grace.
Me too. Me too, mate. God does grace. Grace is God choosing who to save, or
and when to save them.
Your life to. Yes, when to save them.
And who to save and when to save them.
God is the one doing, not us. God is the verb. We are the subject.
Oh, okay. So like this video. I forgot to tell you, like this video and share it and subscribe. Yeah, go ahead, subscribe. And leave comments, because some people get a big kick out of the comments. In fact, I have friends who will actually go and look at a video and hardly watch the video because they're engaged in the comments. So leave plenty of comments and argue like hell, because this is an arguing platform. Okay, so there you have it.
Roger.
That reminder came through Brother Jeremy. I forget to promote my own blah, blah, blah. They have 2 ears. People are a product of their own beliefs. What goes in between your own ears is something of reality. No. Thank you, Sterling. You're a good egg, brother.
All right, and guys, come visit us tomorrow when we do our study on.
Around 5 o'clock.
7 Eastern, I think.
Yeah, 7 Eastern. We'll do a study on soul in the New Testament.
Yeah, I already sent you the stuff.
Okay. Text me in the middle of the day to remind me to go check the email and pull it up, okay?
Sure.
And get ready for the show. Thank you, Alan. Uh-oh.
What?
A little closer there, Jeremy. No, I can't quite read it. Oh yeah, I'll make a post. I'll set it up so that.
Oh yeah, do a YouTube thing so we can know ahead of time.
Right up. Okay, I'll do it after we hang up. Get it? Hang up is a figure of retention. We're not actually hanging up. It's just a metaphor that we're bringing from an old telephone conversation.
Ace,
we're gonna.
Ace,
Yes.
Do you pay for this?
Yes.
Do you pay to use this? All right, just wondering. just asking.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the new covenant, I wanted to point out that the word new covenant is also a figure of retention, because this deal that we're in right now is not a covenant at all. God is dealing graciously with no strings attached. Thank you. And good night. And TTFN. TTFN. Amen. Grace to you.